The next moment, a hideous grinding screech, as of some monstrous machine running without oil, burst from the big telescreen at the end of the room. It was a noise that set one's teeth on edge and bristled the hair at the back of one's neck. The hate had started. As usual, the face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people, had flashed onto the screen. There were hisses here and there amongst the audience. The little sandy-haired woman gave a squeak of mingled fear and disgust. Winston's diaphragm was constricted. He could never see the face of Goldstein without a painful mixture of emotions. Goldstein was delivering his usual venomous attack upon the doctrines of the party, an attack so exaggerated and perverse that a child should have been able to see through it, yet just plausible enough to fill one with an alarmed feeling that other people, less level-headed than oneself, might be taken in by it. Before 30 seconds had passed, uncontrollable exclamations of rage were breaking out from half the people in the room. The sight, or even the thought of Goldstein, produced fear and anger automatically. In its second minute, the hate rose to a frenzy. People were leaping up and down in their place and shouting at the tops of their voices in an effort to drown the maddening, bleeding voice that came from the screen. The little sandy-haired woman had turned bright pink, and her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. The dark-haired girl behind Winston had begun crying out, "Swine! Swine! Swine!" and suddenly picked up a heavy Newspeak dictionary and flung it at the screen. In a lucid moment, Winston found that he was shouting with the others, kicking his heel violently against the rung of his chair. The horrible thing about the 2-minute hate was not that one was obliged to act a part, but on the contrary, that it was impossible to avoid joining in. Within 30 seconds, any pretense was always unnecessary. A hideous ecstasy of fear and vindictiveness, a desire to kill, to torture, to smash faces in with a sledgehammer, seemed to flow through the group of people like an electric current, turning one, even against one's will, into a grimacing, screaming lunatic. I realised that the excerpt I opened with was rather lengthy, but I felt it was an important one. It is a section of 1984 that I find myself coming back to regularly. Allow me to introduce myself. I go by Zen, and I am part of the channel. I recognise that I am likely to be considered the least intellectual of the people here, but I hope I can still output some quality content. With my very young age of 22, I'm afraid I've not been watching society go down the toilet for a decade like people such as Sargon of Akkad or the Britisher, but I have very much been cognizant of it these last few years. However, while people run around and yell about Brexit and the wall, I find myself drawn to a much more important facet of the slow degradation of our countries: the way the people in them treat each other. I fear I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, and it's mostly anecdotal, but please stick with me, it does all come back to that quote we started with. Now, once again I point to my age. I'm 22. I grew up through the noughties, so there are parts of culture that I would often hear of, and I find myself fascinated by them because to me they seemed almost entirely fictitious. I was raised watching the 2005 Doctor Who and all the seasons after that, and as much as it was interesting to see them go to brave new worlds and seeing the future of Earth, I adored the episodes where they went back in time, seeing the real world and what it used to be like. Episodes like The Empty Child, Daleks in Manhattan, Family and Blood, often two-parters, come to think of it. But the one I'm bringing up specifically is Idiot's Lantern. Now, if you're not a Doctor Who fan, then you don't need to know much. The Doctor and his friend time travel back to 1953 and Queen Elizabeth's coronation. There's an evil alien that's sucking people off through TVs. Don't take that out of context, it's actually quite messed up. But anyway, the Doctor saves the day, beats the alien, all is well. So, why do I bring it up if it's a fairly basic plot? Well, it's the setting. 1953, London. It's a national holiday, it's a celebration. And everybody's out and setting up tables in the street. Everybody knows their neighbours by name, and they chatter with each other like they're best friends. Because they are. And I remember when I was young, I watched this episode, and it felt just as alien to me as episodes based on far-flung features with cat nurses, or ice planets with weird tentacle monsters. It only just now dawns on me that Doctor Who is very anime. more thoughts on that later. But yes, back to the topic at hand. People nowadays seem to barely know their neighbours, and if they do, it's because they're that annoying jackass that plays music too loud in the mornings, or they have a noisy car that tends to wake them up on an afternoon. We don't bond with the people around us anymore. If anything, people do all they can to close themselves from each other unless absolutely necessary. The closest I ever get is quiet chatter at a bus stop, and it's, now that I think about it, I realise, always negative as well. Oh, the weather's horrible today. Oh, the bloody bus. And, you know, I long for a Britain, or hello world, where we could be more than that. People who'll pop down the shop and end up managing to meet someone they've never talked to before, but they connect with so well. Instead, we shuffle along through our daily grind, then hurry back to our homes. Now, don't misunderstand. I don't want us to completely shift back to the culture of the 50s. The idea of not bothering to lock your door just doesn't really work in this day and age. But that camaraderie with your local community, it's something we lack. And instead, we have our online communities. And thus we finally slide back to the original point of this video. You see, our world is becoming increasingly partisan, and it's starting to get worrying. As Tim Pool said in a recent video, people in the modern day are getting increasingly violent and confrontational as time goes on. And I'm happy to say it's a problem on both sides. The outflow of videos using the labels of SJW or NPC get more and more by the day. And as much as I agree with the reasons behind a lot of those videos, so many people become more focused on getting angry rather than just discussing the actual problems. It's a simple flaw with the human condition, I've found. So let's go with an example. Sex feels good. And sex feels good to encourage the human race to reproduce. Basic biology. The issue is that humans want to feel good, to the point where some will just continually have sex over and over again, not realising the original purpose of it. And anger, it's not too dissimilar. When we were in a less evolved state, the world was harder. It was kill or be killed. So our brains eventually, they built up a condition of, I have to beat my opponent. Because if we didn't have that in us, then we'd likely just rolled over and died, beaten by other forms of humans. Full disclosure here, by the way, I'm not a psychologist or a historian, I'm just looking at human society and I'm making these conclusions. If I'm wrong on any of these points, go ahead and pop them in the comments. But back to the point at hand. Back then it was simple. You get in a fight with a rival in your tribe or with another tribe, you cave their skull in with a rock and you win. And you feel good. But in the modern day it's more complicated. Victory doesn't just pertain to basic brute strength. It can be psychological. It can mean economical. Proving yourself superior to someone else and being able to put them out of commission, so to speak, it's become something ingrained in our species. And everyone does it to some extent, from Olympians competing, to schoolgirls fighting over a cute boy, to marketplaces where haggling is still a thing. In the book 1984, the government has seized upon the human condition, and they're using it to their advantage. They'd realised the human addiction to victory, and they're continually feeding it, keeping their stock of people sated with that feeling of victory. They constantly talk about how they're winning the war and how life is always getting better, and because the populace want to keep feeling that emotion of victory, they choose to ignore the fact that if you put the pieces together, things are very obviously just getting worse as time goes on. And it culminates in moments like in the quote, a week known as Hate Week, where they yell about how awful their enemy is, and thus prove how good their own country is. And the book shows how deeply mentally broken the people are, as it takes up barely 30 seconds of footage for people to lose their minds in hatred of the enemy. But see, here's the one problem with our own world. We don't have a totalitarian government rationing our hate. We're in charge of it ourselves. And we can't be trusted with it. Much like a sex addict that finds themselves banging a new person every night and catching every illness under the sun, or a glutton for chocolate who balloons out to the point where they can't get out of bed, our society seems to be reaching a point where we're frantic to sate that hate lust. We want to hate, we want to be angry, and we want to win. And to do that, we look at the people we disagree with, and we do everything we can to have them torn down. Not because they'd make our lives worse, but because in our hurry to feel that rush of emotions, we've removed the person in front of us. Like the rapist who wants to feel that rush of sex more than anything, that they forget the person they're doing it with. Like the glutton who gorges on cake after cake as their legs fall off. Society are rushing to feel that feeling of victory. We've defeated racism. We've defeated sexism. We're stopping the alt-right. They forget the people who are being trampled underfoot. I hate seeing videos where some kind of debate is actually just two people yelling at each other, desperate to be the one who's right. Hell, I even hate videos where a YouTuber makes a review or reaction to someone who's just yelling and shouting and saying what's wrong with what they're saying. Because you don't learn anything. But all it takes is one person to just sit down and talk, and you actually learn so much. A short duck back into the anecdotes, I watched Sargon of Akkad for a good few years, roughly around the time Brexit was ramping up, and still do to this day. And when I watched him, I generally agreed with everything he said. He was always speaking with logic, I never disagreed with his opinions, because he was just stating the obvious. This feminist is an idiot and is wrong about what they're saying. This guy doesn't understand how communism works. It was simple. And then he had his stream about UKIP with Kevin Logan. In that video, I learned more about Sargon than I ever did from his Political Compass videos, or the videos where he pointed out how much of an idiot some random screaming feminist was. Sure, those videos informed me, but that livestream made me think. I realised as I watched the two talk, debate, joke, that I was actually disagreeing with him on quite a few things. I won't get into specifics here, but this is the point of the video. If you just sit down and talk, you make so much more headway, so much more progress than any smear campaign can do. And hey, both sides are guilty of it, that's actually the point I was just making. A lot of centrists and right-wing YouTubers, the skeptic community, generally just keep to themselves, and they critique the people who are obviously wrong, and who everyone can clearly tell are wrong. But it's when they get to sit down and talk to someone who's just a regular person, that's when the really interesting stuff comes out. And I don't think it's their fault. Many a time Sargon will joke, yeah, hey, I've reached out to some left-wing people, any of you want to join the stream? And they don't, but it bears mentioning. And it infuriates me. I want to see the debate. I want to see the disagreements. Because that's how you learn. And when you just sit away from your opponents, it just makes everything shit. Take this latest drama online with the voice actor Vic Mignogna. No idea how to pronounce that. Now, full disclosure, I don't know whether he's innocent or guilty, and I'm not passing any kind of judgment. I'm doing everything I can to stay as neutral as possible while this whole thing is playing out. But the problem here is there's so many people who have been proven to be lying about what they've said. It's very clear evidence. It pisses me off, because it doesn't help anyone. It makes both sides of it dig in their heels even more, both so positive that they're right. And the truth gets lost. Buried under anger, and hate, and people not trying to learn, but just trying to win. Now, I know this is something that's been repeated near constantly by YouTubers. Again, the skeptics do tend to say it a lot, but I'm making this video to show the consequences, to try and put it right out there. And I'm going to repeat some of the excerpt that I started with. Any of this sound familiar? People were leaping up and down in their places, shouting at the tops of their voices, in an effort to drown out the voice. The dark-haired girl behind Winston had begun crying out, "Swine! Swine! Swine!" We are fast approaching the world of 1984. But it's not a world where we're controlled by an evil, shadowy government. It's a world where we're controlled by our hate, by our desire to win. A world where all that matters is just beating our opponent. And the only way our society can start to actually improve, it's for people to come together. Talk. Figure out what ails them, and figure out solutions where everyone is happy. Or, at the very least, where everyone can be free to make themselves happy. And it's hard, I know it's hard. Acknowledging your opponent's points is hard. Acknowledging your own points might be wrong is hard. Finding a middle ground where you both succeed, It's really fucking hard, but it's so important. The most important part of politics in the upcoming years, it's not Brexit, it's not Trump, it's not feminism. It's gaining the ability to sit down and just fucking talk.